Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome back to my studio. My name is Mel, and I'm excited to paint with you. So, if this is your first time painting, don't worry. I'm going to keep it super simple, and we're just going to walk through each step of the process in bite sized pieces, one bite at a time. If you've done this before, feel free to move me ahead or pause where you need to. Just sort of control your own process and use me as sort of a guide or just to give you some extra advice. Today we're going to paint Head of Roses. I'm very excited of her. She's totally a queen. And you can change these flowers up however you like to. You can adjust her skin tone however you like to. It's your painting. Do it your way. I'm going to walk you through the painting as it is here, and I'll give you some suggestions or little bits of guidance along the way on some fun ways that you can mix it up. So I have on the screen all of the materials that we're going to be using today, and I'm just going to show them to you real quick. Got a little plastic palette here. We're using red, blue, and green. I also have some white, some black, and a little bit of copper. And that's all we need. I've got 2 brushes. I'm going to go with about a 1/2 inch flat brush. You can go a little bigger, a little smaller if that's what you've got. And then a 1/4 inch flat brush just for some details. I am going to use a black paint pen. You could also use a Sharpie for that. Do a test though. Sometimes Sharpies bleed. But we're going to do that in the second part of this painting. Right now, we're just worrying about getting that paint down. And finally, you need a cup of water and an old rag or some paper towels to clean and dry your brushes with. All right, you ready to go? Let's do this. All right, the first thing that we're going to do is sketch in the figure of our woman here, and then the bulk of her crown of roses or whatever flowers they are. So to start, I'm going to get my small brush and I'm just going to dip it into a little bit of water. I want to drop off just a few little drops of water here in one of the wells on my palette. Just a few little drips. And then I'm going to take just a tiny bit of this copper, like just a speck, not a lot. And I'm going to swirl that in and make almost a watercolor. And I'm going to use this to sketch out my figure as well as her roses. Now, if you're stressed out about it and you want to be able to erase things, go get a pencil. You can also use a piece of chalk. You're going to want to use a color other than white, obviously. But use whatever you've got on hand. Just don't make sure it's not permanent. That's why I'm watering down my paint so much, because it'll be so much easier to hide. So once you've got yourself a little bit of watered down copper paint or your chalk, or you've picked your weapon, we're going to start by sketching in her face. But we need to figure out where to do that. So what I like to do is just sort of divide the canvas in half. You can see my hand is here, and her chin is going to be just to the right of the center and up just far enough. On this size canvas, it's going to be about 3 or 4 fingers, but it's really going to depend on what you're using. So I'm finding the halfway point here at the bottom of my canvas, and I'm going to come over just a little bit, just a scotch, and then up. What I want to do is really use your hand. If your hand can spread out in that spot, that's going to be about the size of her head. So you can just play with that and put it in different spots on the canvas until you figure out where you want it. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to commit. My hand's about where I want it. So I'm going to put her chin just about where the base of my palm was. I'm just going to put a little dot. It might be a little hard for you to see, but I'm going to start off by creating a U. And because this is so light, I can really just bring that out and change the size or the shape of her head. So if you wanted to give her really strong cheekbones, you could do that. You could pause me and just take your time drawing her in. But I just start off with a U and adjust it just a little bit. Give her a little more of a point on her chin, because otherwise she'll look like Jay Leno. Not too much. It's hard to see, isn't it? Okay. Just going to bring that down. And like I said, take your time with this. You're going to want to get that shape pretty close. I'm going to darken mine up just a little bit so that you guys can see it. I can fix mine later. You're going to want to keep yours light. But there we go. Now you can see that a little better. Now what I want to do is start bringing out her shoulders and her neck. So I'm just going to come out past the apex of her chin where that curve starts to go up and bring a couple of lines down. Again, take your time with this. If you need to pause and sketch it out, do that. I'm going to give her a little curve at where her neck is starting to meet the top of her shoulders and bring that out and down. Now, I don't need this to be perfect. I'm going to mess up her shape a little bit when I paint in the background, so I don't want to worry about that too much. So go ahead and pause me here. Fiddle with the shape of your lady's head for a second until she's the queen that you want her to be, and I'll be right back. Okay, so at this point, we should have the outline or silhouette shape of her face as well as the neck and out to the shoulders. So just the bare bones, essentially. So now what we want to do is start going in and working on our roses. And all we're going to do is draw some rough circles and shapes to fill in this space and start building up that crown of flowers. So again, I'm just using that small brush and some watered down copper. And I know that her eyes are going to be right about here. So what I want to do is make sure, actually, the first thing I'm going to do is just put in a little rough circle shape for her mouth, because her mouth is actually going to be some flowers. It's a lot easier and less intimidating to do than lips. So that's sort of a little get out of jail free card that I put in the painting. It makes it a little easier. Lips kind of hang us up. They hang me up. They might hang you up. But if I can make all these flowers, I can make one more. It's thematic. It works. Okay. So now what I want to do is put in some big flowers, and I'm just going to randomly pick spots. What I want to do is make sure that I am covering up the area where I think her eyes are going to be. So if this is her mouth, this is her nose, and her eyes are going to come just across. And you need to figure out from the proportion on yours where that's going to be. And again, we're using chalk or pencils or watered down paint, and we can change these things up. So I put in a couple of little guys here, but really you can see I'm not trying to make a flower shape. I'm not trying to make a circle. It's just a rough round. And I like to go all the way up to the top of the canvas so that things go slightly off the edge. This is blue painter's tape. I'm using a canvas sheet. Because I paint so many paintings with you guys, I'd end up with an entire room filled with spent canvas. So I like to use these canvas sheets, and then when I pull it off, it leaves that cool white edge, and I feel really fancy. But I digress. That's not what we're here for. I'm just trying to fill in this space. So I'm using that watered down. If it runs, don't worry about it. We're going to paint over it. I'm not going to sweat the small stuff. Now, the bigger you make your flowers, the fewer you have to do. But I just like to start setting up where they're going to be and just start filling in that space. So I'm just continuing with that watered down copper. I'm getting a little lost and carried away building up these shapes. No big deal. I don't go for symmetry. So I don't want the left side of her crown to look exactly the same as the right. If you're a little type A, you might need to drink a little right now and just embrace the chaos of this garden we're putting on her head. But this is the point that you want to get to. And I know that is still a little hard to see. Let me darken that up for you, so you can see it a little bit better. None of these lines are perfect. I'm just coming in real loosely here with different sizes and sort of shapes, and just putting a little wiggle around the edge of each circle, building that up. And at this point, I'm good. I'm not going to mess with it anymore. I'm going to rinse off my brush When you're rinsing off your brush, just give it a little gentle wiggle, like you're sweeping the bottom of your cup. You just sort of tap it off, drag those bristles across the edge. And then I just sweep it onto my paper towel or your rag, and it's ready to go for the next round. Okay, now get yourselves to this point. Remember, we want the shape of her face, her neck, and her shoulders, and those flowers. And then we're going to come in and paint the background. So let me know when you're ready. I'll be here. Okay, I've zoomed way in, so I'm going to get my big head out of the way. This way you can see what's really going on. All right, now I'm getting my 1/2-inch flat brush. You can use a round brush. I just like the way this one sort of covers a little more smoothly. And I'm going to create a mix of blue and green to start. So here's my palette. Got my brush. I'm going to take a scoop of green, about the size of a pea, an equal amount of that blue, and put them right there together, all nice and happy, and give them a swirl. Now you can see I have 3 colors now. I have a dark shade of teal with a little streak of blue and a little streak of green in it. And what I'm going to do is just start using this hat stroke. You've probably heard that cross stroke if you've ever watched Bob Ross. He talks about it. And I'm just going to start dropping off some paint. I'm not trying to cover this completely. My paint's a little thick, so what I'm going to do is just take a little dip in my water, just moisten up those bristles a little bit, and then work that little bit of water into my paint. And I'm just working my way around, dropping that teal, blue, green all around in that background. But you can see there's a lot of space here that I haven't filled in. What I'm going to do now is come over to the edge of my white, just the very edge. I don't want to mess it all up. And grab a little bit of that. Bring it over by my blue and green. And you can see now I'm picking up both at the same time, this blue-green mix and a little bit of white. And I'm starting to come in and fill in some of those empty sections. Now you may feel like you need a lot of paint. You don't. You don't want to hear a scratchy sound. You don't want to hear your bristles scratching right across there. I almost said Brussels. I don't know what that was. And now I'm just trying to fill in these spaces. And as I bring that cross stroke, that X, and sweep through, I get little streaks that are darker and lighter than they are in other areas. And that's the magic that Bob Ross tells us is going to happen when we're painting. Now look here, you see how I went over that line? I don't care. I'm not going to freak out about it. I don't need to color within the lines here. That's not a thing. At least not for this part. And I'm just leaving different tones and streaks because I want this background to have a little bit of variety and texture, but I don't really want it to detract from that beauty. So I'm pretty confident and happy with this section. I am going to grab just a little bit of blue and come down along that edge to help frame it. Put in just a few little blue streaks. The more you sweep through and mess with it, the more it's going to blend into a whole new color. So when you get a streak that you like, hit it and quit it. Leave it alone. Don't come back. Leave it be. And we're just going to continue working our way all around here. Now, obviously, I move faster than you do, and that's okay. You can probably walk or run a lot faster than I can. But at any point, you can pause me. Just hit pause and continue working. And when you get your section completed, come on back. I'll be here. Not going to go anywhere. So I'm just filling in these sections. You can probably see a lot of brush strokes in your canvas. That's okay. That's going to provide some texture. Once this layer is down and dry, if it still feels really thin, you could always add a second layer to it before you move on. That's really the fantastic thing about us painting together with you at home, or at least not being in a studio, because in a studio, there's so much fun to go and party, but you have to keep up because there's only so many hours or so much time. And whoever's teaching the painting that night has to keep everybody on pace. So this is a really nice way if you want to just dive deep down the rabbit hole and totally get into your painting, add layers to build that brilliance and dimension. You can. Okay, so I've got this whole left side done. I'm going to work a little bit. I've got this right side done. I'm going to come up to this top corner. Anywhere that's beyond my roses to the edge of my canvas, that's what I want to do. And again, I'm going to overlap some of those edges because I'd rather bring my rose back out over my background than have to come back in and fill in some little white gaps that were left. So this is one of those situations now where I have my background done and you're probably still cruising along at your own merry pace. Have fun. Come back and see me in a minute. I'm going to let this dry. So you can let it dry. You can hit it with a blow dryer, whatever works for you. Ooh, wow, that was really close. The whole goal is to just make sure that this is dry before I come in and start working on the skin tone. That's what's going to be next. I don't want any of this wet stuff starting to smear and blend in with the other stuff. So you can give this a few minutes to dry or hit it with your blow dryer. Either way, once you're at this point, come back and see me. I'll be here waiting for you. Okay, so now we've got our background down and we're going to start working on our skin tone. Now, to do that, I'm going to use copper, and you can either add black or white, but do not add both. Okay, you'll see what I mean in just a second here. I am going to make sure that my 1/2-inch brush is nice and clean. I've got all that turquoise and teal out from the background. Wipe it off. And I want to start working on my gal here. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is take a scoop of my copper and just drop it right here in the center of my palette where I'm going to mix. And that's about the size of a nickel. That's all I need at this point. And then I'm going to take the very, very corner of my brush and just grab a tiny, can you see how tiny that is? Tiny dab of black, and stir that in. Now, if this gets too dark, your immediate intuition is going to be to add white. Do not do that. If your copper gets too dark, just grab some more fresh copper, start it over here, and move little bits of your darker copper into the fresh copper. Now, if you want your skin tone, let me just mix this up a little darker so you can see your options here. Little bit. Oh, she's so bronzy and beautiful. Okay. Just going to sort of wipe all that extra off my brush and clean it so that I can show you how to make some lighter skin. Okay, again, grab some copper and a little tiny dab of white. And you can make yourself a lighter skin tone. But she'll still be super fabulous. So we've got both those tones there going on. And I'm actually going to use this one to highlight. I think that'll be good. All right. Grab that guy. Now, I just want to show you what's going to happen. If you take a little bit of copper with black in it and add white, you're going to get sort of a sickly gray underneath it. And nobody wants that. So play with these until you get the tone that you like. And then we're going to I start with the neck and the shoulders. And I'm just sweeping that in, overlapping a little bit. We're going to do 2 layers of this. So metallic paint is really clear paint with a lot of fine glitter in it. So it's going to be very translucent. You're going to see all your brush strokes. Any streaks from the background that you had are going to be in there. Don't be tempted to put more paint on. Just one nice thin layer. Once it dries, we'll come back and add another layer and we'll get really good coverage. It's like when you paint your fingernails. You do not want to put a really thick layer on and hope that it dries, because then you're going to get all that gumminess. Ooh, her chin got crazy there. Okay. Again, not going to worry about it. You'll, if you put nail polish on too thick, it gets really gummy and it holds, marks and it doesn't work well. Takes forever to dry and you still don't get good coverage. This is acrylic paint. It sort of follows the same principle. So I like to put down one decent layer, sweep it out to smooth it, just a little bit, and then I'm going to let it be. Or I'm going to try to let it be. Okay, that's it. We're just going to leave it alone. Let that layer dry. And while that's drying, I'm going to come up and start the first layer on my flowers in her head. Or on her head, not in her head. So get your skin tone down. Do your bronzing. Don't worry about shading. Don't worry about highlight. Don't worry about shadow. All you want to do at this point is just get a base layer down, an undercoat, so that we can cover that up with the next one and put in all that definition. We'll work hard when we need to work hard. For now, we're being lazy. Okay, bare minimum. So get yourself to this point and come back and see me. I'll be here. Okay, now we're going to focus on our flowers. And I apologize if there's a little bit of a glare. I am still trying to figure out my lighting situation. So if you have any tips, drop a girl a comment because I could use all the help I can get. Okay, what we want to do with our flowers is basically pick out 3 or 4 tones. You can see I have black with red to make a burgundy here. Added a little bit of white to it to get this lighter sort of pinky mauve tone. This is a little purple with a little bit of black. You can adjust this however you want. You want bright red flowers, have bright red flowers. If you want white flowers, have white flowers. You're going to have to just be mindful of letting things dry so that you're not getting a whole lot of mix if you want to be really specific. I'm going for this messy look because I like the drips and it's a lot easier to accomplish with a very dramatic effect. But do you, boo, if you want to like go deep down that rabbit hole and make every flower perfect and completely in shape, God bless, have fun. Send me a picture. But I'm going to be a little bit sort of loosey-goosey with mine. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is start off with this darker tone. I want to fill in the bigger ones and then work my way forward. That's going to give this some depth and dimension. So I'm going to make these in the well and these little pods here on my palette. So I'm grabbing some red and a tiny little dab of black and stirring those together. And I'm going to get a really rich red. The more black I add, the darker it's going to get. And I'm actually going to swipe a little bit of copper and throw that in there just to give it that little shimmer. It needs a little shimmer. Okay. See that? Perfect. Okay. Little dip in the water to thin that down just a scotch. Okay. I'm going to start with this big guy right up here. And all I'm doing is just filling it in. But this is the way I'm going. This is the procedure. Brush strokes are going to leave some texture. So I want to go inward, working from the outside in toward the middle. And then as these layers dry, the direction the paint goes is going to help build up the character, the shape of the leaves. So there's one. Let's put in another one. Let's do this one over here. And again, I'm working that perimeter, following that curve, just coming around, working my way toward the middle. Let's see, we'll do one more. Let's do this one. There we go. Now, you know your painting is not going to look exactly as mine. And even though I painted this one is not going to look exactly the same. They're not supposed to. Paintings are like fingerprints. Every one is a little bit different. I'm going to try to use up this paint before I add any more white to it. So I'm just coming down and filling in any other flowers that I might want to use this color for. And I definitely want to use this shade for her mouth flower because it's bomb and I like it. Okay. Let's put in a couple more. Remember, you want this bottom edge to overlap where her eyes would be her flowers, her crown. They're falling down in front of her eyes. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. Balance that out. Don't feel like you have to do one and one and one and one. Mix it up. It's a little bit better when it's random. Okay, so I have a little bit of this burgundy color left, and I'm just going to grab a little white and drop it in there so that I don't waste that paint. And then I can get a new color. And I'm just swirling it together. Add a little bit of white. I don't want it runny, but I want it creamy. I want my paint to go from pudding consistency, to like heavy whipping cream so that it glides off my brush. Okay, so let's pick out some more spots and keep going. Now, I'm not really worrying a whole lot about building up dimension. You can see I've overlapped here. It is not a sin. Nothing bad is going to happen. Okay, I'm going to put on another layer after this. So really, I'm just going to keep on going, filling them in. Now, part of this flower is underneath that one. So again, I'm not worrying about it. And you can see how I sort of set these centers off every once in a while. Start working my way out. So the middle of the flower isn't going to be exactly here, maybe off center a little bit. And that'll help make flowers look like they're tipping in different directions. Oh, look, I'm like who's the guy on Addams Family where the hand just comes out and goes, woo. Okay, that's not what you're here for. I digress, sorry. Okay, now let's add a little bit more white. Just take it down another shade. A little bit more white. Getting those even lighter. And pick out a few of your flowers. And again, same drill. You're going to be so good at this by the end of our time together. And it's okay if two of the same color are next to each other. Don't sweat it. Like here, I have these little guys, sort of in little pairs. And now I think that what I'm going to do is add a little bit of blue to what's left of my pink. Again, if I'm getting ahead of you and you're panicking, you're screaming at the computer or the phone, slow down, Mel, slow down. Just hit the pause button. I'll still be right here when you get back. All right, that's super blue. And I really don't like that blue heavy, so I'm going to grab a little bit more red until I get a purple that I'm happy with. There we go. So with lavenders or purples, you can start with equal amounts of blue and red. And then I sort of add a little more blue or a little more red until I'm happy with it. All right, there we go. And there's a few streaks in there. If there's streaks, leave them. That's all the good stuff. It's the good stuff. Okay, another flower here. Again, I'm overlapping where I don't want to overlap. Don't care. I'll fix it on the next go round. And then one more little guy over here. Now, I feel like this just totally got off balance because I really liked that angle, but I'm not going to fuss with it. You may find this or find yourself at this point where it feels a little wonky or offset. Let it dry. When we come back in and start adding our copper little extra filler, we do our second layer, we can always come back in and add a little more. But this is one of those things. I'm not going to follow my own advice. I'm just going to put one there. I think that might have fixed it. If we start fussing with it at this point, things are going to get crazy. And all of a sudden, there's no room left. That crown of flowers has just taken over the entire thing. So get your first layers in. Let them overlap. Don't worry about whether or not we've got that depth or dimension yet. We'll add that in the next layer. So get yourself there. Come back and see me in just a few minutes when you've got it yourself to this point. So we are going to try a new angle for this section and see if it works any better. Now, what we want to do is come in and start our second layer of skin tone. Yours may have dried up. It's okay. It does not need to be exactly the same. So I went with a darker tone, so I'm going to grab a little bit of copper and just a tiny bit of black and get those in. Let it deepen up just a little bit. And I'm going to come in again, start with the neck. This time I'm trying to pull that brush nice and slow along that edge, make it nice and clean. And you can see how much darker it is. There's a little bit of that is because my paint is darker, but really it's because we've got better coverage with that second layer. And just taking my time, going nice and easy along that stretch. Now, before I come in and start working on her chin and the rest of her face, I want to add just a little bit. I'm going to sweep off my brush, grab just a little bit of copper, and I'm going to put just a few little hints, just a few little quick hints, little streaks on that left side, because that's where my light's coming from. So I want it to have just a little hint of brightness. I want it a little lighter on the left. The other way to do that is to just make this side a little bit darker too. Either way will work. And don't worry about making her anatomically perfect. We're just trying to get a nice skin tone. When we put in these lines with our paint pen, that will give the suggestion of the rest of her body. Okay, so now we're going to come in and do the same thing on our face. Going nice and easy. Getting that chin. Bringing those edges down nice and slow. I'm not really worried about giving her cheekbones or any of that. Her dramatic crown is what makes her the queen. We're not going to worry about the rest of it. I'm just getting in here nice and close to my flowers and then just sort of gently sweeping over, trying to smooth out any really intense or crazy brush strokes. Most of those on the second layer will just sort of disappear as it dries. So there we go. Now she's got a face. Pretty simple, little bit of copper, again, just a little bit of brightness here on that left side of her face. Just brighten it up. I could even bring a little darkness here down the center to sort of suggest the shape or shadow of her nose, but I don't want to fuss with that too much. I really want to keep it as simple as possible because this is really just a vehicle for this crown. And I think that I feel the same way about her face and neck as I do about Toast. Toast is just a vehicle for butter, and her head and neck are really just somewhere to put that big old glorious crown on. So get yourself there. Take your time. Come back when you're ready. We'll start this next layer on the roses. All right, I'm just getting my brush cleaned up. I'm still working with that big brush at this point. And my goal is going to be working on the details of this crown of flowers. Now, one thing I really want to emphasize before we even dive into this is that all of the form and shape and definition of this painting is going to come from the line work that we do either with a marker or a paint pen. At this point, we just want to create the suggestion of those rose petals. Here, for example, I used a little white to highlight. I used a little copper. I'm going to use the base color and then something just a little lighter and brighter with this sort of little parentheses shape to give that suggestion. So again, I'm going to start off with my darkest color. So that was red with a little bit of black in it. And again, doesn't have to be an exact match. It's rare that you ever get the same color exactly twice. But one thing we do want to do is make sure that now we start building our roses. So whatever is going to be furthest back, that's where I'm going to start. So I just take a look, or you can look at your painting and figure out which ones you want in the back. And I'm starting with this guy right up here at the top. Bringing those petal strokes around that edge. Put in a couple more. This flower is in front of this one, the one I just painted. So I'm coming around where it overlaps almost completely. And again, not a lot of paint. I don't need a thick layer. I just want to come around with these parenthesis semicircular strokes, working from the outer edge, coming on in. Let's see, what else do we have over here? Just work your way around whatever you want to be this color, this darker red. Come on in, drop it off. Now, the idea of working our way from back forward isn't fail-safe because not every color, every flower that's in the back is going to be this color. But we can always go back and touch those things up once we get this basic part in. Okay, my dark color is done. So what I want to do is just scrape off any of that excess paint out of my bristles. I'm just going to sweep this dirty brush off. I'm not going to rinse it. I'm just sort of sweeping it to get that excess paint off. And I'm going to grab just a little touch of copper. And for the copper, we're going to use my hit it and quit it technique. Just like that. Created the impression of a rose there. Let me do the bigger one. Grabbed a little copper. And in fact, I don't want to waste the skin tone color, so I'm using that. And I'm just making these parenthesis-like strokes, these little semicircles. Nothing has to be perfect. That line work is going to do it all for us. So I'm just building this up, creating just a few little peaks of light, little highlight. And as long as everything follows sort of the same pattern or technique, they're all going to look good. You just don't want to mess with them too much because then everything starts to be blending together and it becomes one new color that you really don't want. Hit it and quit it. Just put in those little bits. Oh, with her mouth, how pretty is she gonna be? Look at those lips. Fantastic. Okay, so I've got my dark red flowers where I want them. I've got that little bit of highlight. And now I'm going to do what I did before. I'm just going to take a little bit of white and add it into that darker color to do my next ones. And I believe those, yeah, there we go, pretty close. Now, I should have painted this flower before that one, but I can get right up close to those edges and just be careful, take my time. Sometimes little darker tones come out of my brush because I didn't clean it. And that's okay. Again, that helps build up that depth and dimension I'm looking for. Don't be afraid to take a little dab of water and work that into your paint. We don't want watercolors, but what we do want is for that paint to just flow off the brush. You don't want it to be like peanut butter. You want it to be nice and creamy. Curved strokes overlapping. There we go. 1, 2, those are the only ones in that color. So again, sweeping off the brush, I'm going to grab just a little tiny bit of white. Whoops, that had some green in it. Fresh stuff. And then I'm just sort of tapping off any excess so I don't get big blobs. And here I go. Just a few little swoops following, working my way in from the outer edge. Anytime I pick up more white, I dab off that excess and use those parenthesis shapes to just bring in a little bit of texture. That's all. Just a little bit, little dab will do you. Oh, here we go. Here it is. Just remember, Light little touches. You can always come back and add more. You can't take it away. Okay, so those two are done. Now I'm going to come into this lighter pink. So again, taking some more white, adding that into the color we were just using. It's a little dark, so I'm going to bring in some red just to make it a little pinkier. More like Pepto-Bismol or blush or bashful if you watch Steel Magnolias. Okay, so this is where I want to start making my flowers pop a little bit out over each other. So you can see I'm bringing that guy out, letting it overlap. Circular strokes, working my way in. This little one, this one's just going to stay tucked underneath. So I'm only painting in the half I see. And again, one more here. Outside in, outside in. I feel like Mr. Miyagi, wax on, wax off. Okay. So you can see, I know I paint faster than you. Don't feel pressured. Take your time. But this does come together fairly quickly. Out in. And you can see I'm only doing the base color. If your paint is drying faster than you're moving, you can do them one at a time. You can come in and add your base color and then your highlights. Just figure out what works, with the temperature and humidity of wherever you happen to be. All right, lighter colors. I'm going to use a little pink. Now, I don't know if you guys have noticed this tiny little spot of white here. It has been driving me crazy. But I know that I'm going to come in and put in these little copper pieces of filler, and I'll just stick one there. All right, so we got our lighter tone here. Wipe off my brush, pick up a little bit of clean white, dab that off, and hit it and quit it. Little swirls. When you see that that paint isn't staying as bright and it's just sort of blending because you're picking up that wet pink with your brush, wipe off your bristles, grab a little bit more. Because otherwise everything's going to get sort of mucky and muddy together. And it does. It looks really goofy until we start doing that line work. That's what I've been telling y'all. That line work is what gives this everything its structure here. So last one, little bits, hit it, quit it, move along. A little bit more. And leave some of those bright streaks. They're okay. They're your friends. We don't make mistakes. We learn from them. They're happy accidents. We move on. Okay, last color is going to be my purple. And I still actually have a ton of that left from earlier. If you need to make it, remember we start off with equal parts of red and blue. And you can add more red or blue to your liking. You can even add a little white to make it lighter. Oh, see now, look, I brought that guy over and it's got to stay there. Okay, outside in. Don't fuss with it too much. What are we going to do here? Okay, let that one overlap. You just sort of have to make these decisions. And if you go wrong and you overlap something that you don't want, hit it with the blow dryer. And once it's dry, you can go back in and fuss with it a little bit. Now, for my purpley flowers, what I want to do, wipe off my brush. I could use white, but I'm going to use the pink from my earlier flowers, just to sort of tie everything a little bit together. And again, I'm using that curved stroke. You can switch to the smaller brush if you feel like that will give you better, more defined little strokes. I can just flip my brush to the edge and use that skinny side. That makes it a little easier for me. But again, it's your painting, your process, whatever works for you. I find that the more comfortable you are and the less you have to worry about, the better your painting is going to turn out. That's why we call it paint and sip and give you a little bit of booze, because that usually helps take the edge off. And as you can see, just using the edge of that corner, hitting, quitting, moving those little parenthesis strokes around to just create those shapes. And that's it. That's all I'm going to do with those flowers, because if I mess with them anymore, I'm just going to muck them up, and I don't want to. So my next order of business is going to be coming in and adding these little copper, I don't know what you call them, little filler flowers. I'm going to use my 1/2-inch brush. If you want to use your smaller one, feel free. But I'm just going to grab a little bit of copper, and see the corner edge of my brush? I'm just going to press and lift. We call this stippling. It's just like tapping, and you can come in wherever you like and just tap. The point is to keep everything bouncing and moving. Just bounce it, move it along. Remember, it's not going to have any form. This looks fantastic because we squiggled those little lines to make it look like brains. But for here, we're just tapping it in. This is sort of like if you watch those Instagram makeup videos or on YouTube where the Instagram makeup influencer is showing you their makeup and they're cutting creases and things look weird and awkward until they start blending. That's what's going on here. We're not waiting to blend, but we're going to add definition later. Okay. Now, I'm just using up the copper that I have left because, waste not, want not. Oh, I need a little in here. And you can even come over your flowers. Starting to run out here. Add a little bit. Let me grab some more copper. Hang on. All right, I grabbed a little more copper. And I'm just going to come back through and tap it in. Leave weird shapes. Don't try to make them into actual flowers. Just let it be loose. It's just filler. A little highlight. Okay. So now I'm going to come back over here and you can see I just took a little of that fresh copper, streaked it along that left side. It was a spontaneous urge. And that's just going to give her a little bit. You could even add a dab of white to it and just put on a few little highlights here. Just a few little streaks. They look really shocking and really sharp, but you can see I'm just sort of blending that in with my fingers and leaving a little bit of that sort of sharpness or brightness to it. Also gives it a little bit of just sort of an abstract, expressionist maybe sort of look. All right. Now, if I mess with it too much, I'm going to mess it up. So at this point, we've done most of our painting. Oh, look at this. I forgot to do my dropping flowers. Why didn't anybody tell me? Oh, silly me. So I'm just going to come in and add a few more. Use whatever colors you have. Maybe just some plain red over here. Just a few, and then I like to put in a few little falling petals. Again, take your time with these. Do your thing. You've learned how to make flowers. You can make them over and over again with whatever colors you choose. That's all just up to you. There we go. Good enough. The next, though, get your flowers in. I don't even want to tell you what the next thing is yet. Take your time. Don't fuss with it too much. Trust me when I tell you that sometimes the best thing that you can do is stand up, go get yourself a refill on your glass of wine, go pet the dog, take a walk, come back and stand back. Because typically when we're painting, we're standing or sitting about 18 inches to 2 feet from our canvas, which is really like when you flip the mirror over in the morning to tweeze your eyebrows or your lip. It's terribly frightening. So what you have to do is step back because our eyes and our brain require distance between us and what we're looking at in order for eyes to focus and gain proper perspective. So if it's looking a little goofy, it's going to until we get the lines in. But if you're looking to figure out if your shape is balanced or if it's wonky or lopsided, stand up, step back, put some distance between yourself and your painting. And when you come back, you'll be able to look at it a little bit differently. Sometimes painting projects are like partners. A little bit of distance does a lot of good for that relationship. So get yourself to this point. When you're ready, come back and we're going to make these drips. All right, I'll see you in a few minutes. All right, so we are going to start our drips. And I've grabbed an extra rag because I'm vertical and I don't want this all running down the wall. Hopefully you've got something on the table or the surface that you're painting on to protect it. I'm going to use my small brush for this. And what I want are my paint colors that I used for my flowers, a little bit of copper, and a lot of water. So you could even use your big brush, dunk it in the water, and then just let all that water drip right into your little puddle on your palette and stir. And you want it smooth and really thin. You want this to be about as thin as milk so that it will run. So let me show you what I'm going to do. I think I've got mine pretty thin. What I'm going to do is come on over here to the edge of my flower and just give it a little wiggle and a press. You can pick where you want your drips, but your drips are going to go where your drips want to go. So there's a few. You can even bring some over to the other edge. I use mostly my drips on the edge, so that way they're not all running down her face. Now, if you want to stop a drip, you can just take your paper towel and hit it. It'll drop. It'll stop. Words are hard. I have one eye on my drips because I don't want them coming all the way down onto my wall. And as they get closer, I'm just going to hit that little bead of water on the end. Tap it with my finger so they don't come all the way down. And again, take your time with this. Put your drips wherever they make you happy. I'm going to try a little bit of that pink. So I'm mixing in a lot of water into that lightest color I had. In fact, I'm going to add a little white, make it a little bit more dramatic. Oh, lots of water. I'm going to thin that down real good. You'll see it goes through a gravy phase where it gets a little lumpy. Keep pushing through. Keep pushing through. Just keep adding water. Stirring it around. Okay, back to it. Coming up here to the edge of my flowers and just hitting that. Let it run. Now, you don't have to do drips or drops if you don't want to. It's your painting. I just think that it adds like a fun little, I don't know, exciting effect there. All right, get as many or as few in as you like. I'm going to do copper now. Add some water to my copper. Again, stir it, get it through that sort of droppy, drippy, lumpy phase. I think I just made that up, but you're probably picking up what I'm throwing down. And come start dropping your copper. Now, I like to let the copper sort of drip down from some of these top ones through and over some of my flowers. If they start to get really close to her face, I'll probably stop them. I don't think I want that. There's more on my wall. Don't tell. Keep dropping those strips. Wherever and however you like. Just push and let gravity do its job, like your Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park explaining the chaos theory. Just let it drip and drop. There we go. So take your time, get yourself to this point. Now, once we are at this point, we're going to stop and let our canvas dry completely, because the next step is going to be our line work. And we cannot use paint pens or Sharpies on wet paint. So you're going to want this to dry entirely. That may mean you have to leave it alone for at least an hour. Hit it with the blow dryer, hit it with your heat gun. I'm going to hit mine with the heat gun, and then I'm going to take it off this surface and lay it on a tabletop to work with. So think about that as you start to set yourself up for the next step of this painting. Is you may want to save this for tomorrow evening when you're going to have a little more time, or another night this week. Let it dry completely. Find yourself a flat surface, because we can't do our line work with things up on easels. Our paint pens are going to require gravity to work properly and to flow smoothly. And I also think it's really nice to be able to balance your hand on the table and use your paint pen just like you would a marker or a regular pen. So play with your flowers, leave it when you get to this point. And I know it looks incomplete and it looks a little awkward, but I promise once we get those markers out, the whole world changes. So enjoy yourself. Come back to me when you're ready, and I will see you in a little bit. This is when we get to like completely nerd out and meditate, creating our little flower lines. So I'll see you in a bit. I hope you're having a good time. Okay, so like I told you earlier, I have found myself a flat surface to paint on. I have let my painting and process dry completely, and I've got my black paint pen. Now you can use a Sharpie if you don't have a paint pen, but I would totally recommend doing a spot test. And yes, it's sort of like when you dye your hair, they tell you to do a test spot. You really do need to, because depending on the kind of marker you're using, it can bleed. And those lines won't stay clean and crisp. They'll sort of spread out. So find a little spot, test it out, let it dry. If you don't like it, you can always paint over it, right? That's the beauty of painting, is we can always cover it up. So get your paint pen, get your marker, get yourself set up. I'm going to switch camera angles so that you can see what I'm doing, and let's put in some lines. That's where all that structure and shape is going to come from. So get a drink. Let's do it. Okay, I'm back. So here we can see the completed one, and I'm going to use it from time to time as an example to just show you what we're working on. You also should have your gallery card or an image up online that you can reference if you need to. Don't be afraid to pause and take breaks. This is my favorite part of the painting, because creating all these lines, it's just, it's an easy way to get lost and just relax, sort of meditative. So let me show you what we're going to do. First, let me pull this gal up. Well, actually, let me show you on her. First thing I'm going to do is the outline of her face and her shoulders, and try to give her just a little structure there to her body with a few lines. So when you get your paint pen, make sure you shake it really good. The other thing is, when it's brand new, mine is black on the top, but when they're brand new, this felt tip will be completely white. And what you have to do is shake it, push it down, and hold it for a really long time. And when you think you've held it long enough, pick it up, look at the tip, and see if that black paint has made its way to the tip. If it hasn't, just keep doing it. Use it on a piece of newspaper. You don't want to jab it over and over again. That's going to mess up the tip of your pen. Just push down until the little piece goes in. Let me show you. Push it in and let it fill up and bring it back out until you get a nice sort of smooth sort of line from it. And what I'm going to do is, I'm desperately searching here. I'm going to grab a little piece of scratch paper. So I just sort of test out my pen to make sure I'm getting smooth lines. The lighter my touch, the thinner my lines are going to be. The harder I push, they get a little bit thicker. Okay, here we go. Let's move this gal out of the way. Put her where I can grab her again. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is just come down and outline her chin and her face. And you can see I'm moving my canvas, and I recommend doing that. On this flat surface, you can see my hand is balanced. It's resting, and I am just using it like a marker. An outline her shoulder. Now, you see this little goober mark here? I'm not going to mess with that too much. If I try to even everything out, the rest of the line is going to get thicker and thicker, and I'm not going to be able to make it thinner. So I'm just going to be careful. Now, let me try to get the rest of this piece here where you can see it. Come back in. And again, I'm just going over outlining that edge, and I don't need it to be absolutely perfect. I'm also just going to come in, put a couple little lines coming down her throat, give it just a little bit of shape, and then put in a couple little lines here for her collarbones. And that's it. That's all I need. If I get too crazy, things are gonna, like I said, I can't take those lines away. I can always come back in and add more later if I want to. But let's start with some flowers, shall we? I'm going to start up here in her crown. I prefer that, and then come back once I get a rhythm going and I know what I'm doing. Then I'll come back in and work on her lips. But because they're her lips, I don't want to start off there. And the first flower I'm going to do is one that you can see. Let's see if I can get that in there. There we go. We're going to start with this one at the top because I can almost see the whole thing. And I'm going to start in the middle. And the way that I create these, let me bring this down just a little bit so you got a better view. Look at that. Okay. I start by creating a parenthesis and then another one so they hook in together. Can you see that? And then I'm just going to start on the edge of one and create a bumpy line and just sort of curve around. I don't want to make, let me show you on a scratch paper here. I don't want to make a perfectly smooth curve. I like to put a little wiggle into it. And that just makes it look a little bit more natural. So I've got two curves here. They've started. You can see their start and stops. So I'm going to start in the middle of the next one and come out. And just start building up this way. I always try to offset them. So I've got a full petal over where there was a little bit of a crease when I can. I think that just sort of gives it a nice, organic, more natural shape. Keep working your way all the way around till you start to reach that outer edge. And as you get to that outer edge, you can just bring those down into the center and let them meet up. Now you can see I'm not trying to follow those highlight lines I had, but all of a sudden I've got a flower. Let's do another one, shall we? Let's do this little pink one over here. Little half circles that are offset or parentheses in the middle. Grab one and start creating your bumpy half circles. And look at that line. It's not really perfect. I can go over it again, but I don't want to go over it too much because then they get thick. And that makes them a little funky. And again, offset. Just offset each one, working your way around. Now, if you're really unsure or nervous, you can always take a piece of chalk. But chalk is going to gum up your paint pen. That dust from the chalk is going to get all stuck in your paint pen there and make it not work so well. There we go. Got another one. So at this point, I recommend pausing the video so that you don't have to listen to me continually babble. And can keep working your way around. Just keep building up your flowers. You can start with one color. You can start with one section. Whatever works for you. Something you should keep in mind is now these two flowers are meeting up. This purple one is above these pink two. So I'm just starting from those edges and working my way around so that I don't overlap there too much. There we go. So with these two done, I can build the middle one. Same process, have circles. Working my way around with these bumpy little petal shapes. Nothing is perfect. Doesn't need to be perfect. Even Bob Ross would tell you not to worry about it. And now this one looks like it's above these two. So I'm going to keep working my way around through my flowers. And you do the same thing. Once we get all our lines, don't do the mouth. We'll come back and do that one together so that we can give each other moral support. But we're just going to keep working our way around all of these flowers. So turn on some tunes or your favorite true crime podcast and just let yourself relax a little bit. Take your time. Don't overthink it. It may look funky up close, but when we pull it away, whoop, it gets a little bit more perspective and better shape. All right, we're doing all the roses, and then except for the mouth, and then we'll come back and work on our little copper filler flowers. So, okay, so you can see I have my lines drawn in on all of my flowers. And I'm just going to come in and work on her mouth. Now, when I work on her mouth, one thing I want to do is use this sort of center of the petal to create the shape of her lips. So you could just make a little line going across the middle right there, and then draw your half petals, those little bumpy shapes going up. And that will start the lines of our petals off, but it'll also sort of set us off in the direction of lips, with one lip coming up this way and one lip going down that way. Take your time, breathe, don't panic. Look at there. Easy peasy. Beautiful cover girl. Look at her. Well, that light's shining on there for you. But now we've got our lady ready to go. So once all of our rose lines in, our only step left, let me bring the original down for you, is going to be these little squiggly lines. And that's really all they are on our copper filler. Let me find a good piece for you. Let's start with this one. Whoa, let's start with this one up in the corner. The first thing I'm going to do is just bring my paint pen and roughly outline those edges. And then I just start squiggling through. Just little squiggles. And boom. It gives that filler some structure, some shape, and some texture. So let's do another one. Just going to outline and then bring in these little squiggly lines. You don't have to overthink it. You just want to keep that brush moving. Excuse me, that pen. Same thing in this purpose, I guess, right? Coming around the edges. Just a weird little amoeba shape. Make some loops, some squiggles. Boom. So I'm just going to finish these up. Take your time. Pause if you need to. But we're really on our last little step here. Squiggle, squiggle. Boom. Drop the paint pen. Look at her. Hang on, let me switch camera views so you can see the whole. Okay. So let me show you. There we go. Oh, that lighting. We're going to have to work on that. If anybody knows anything about studio lighting, let me know. But you can see what's going on. We've got all our lines and definition. Here's her twin, the original that we started with. How awkward. My paper won't stand up. And you can see there are subtle differences. There are always going to be differences. That's the difference between painting something yourself and buying a print, right? Because you could just always have this printed on canvas and hang it on your wall if that's how you want it. But painting, it's that process. It's getting our hands dirty. It's hanging out, having a little fun. How sweet is she with her head of roses? Ah, oh, love her. Ah, love her. So I hope that you love yours and that you're happy with her. Please send me pictures, put them on my Facebook page, send them to me in the email, whatever you got to do. And I hope that you had a really good time. I can't wait to paint with you again. So come back and see me real soon. All right, you guys, be well, stay safe, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.